Evaluation, the fourth step of public relations. You've done the research, you've planned your program, you've communicated. Now we're trying to figure out, how did you do? So let's go about sharing the screen, getting started. Give me a second. All right, evaluation, step, and final 4. So what is the point of evaluation? What's the purpose of it? Well, you've executed what you had planned and researched, and now you want to see, how did you do? The idea of any kind of evaluation really is to know, how can we do better next time? Was time well spent? Was money well spent? Did we get the results we were looking for? Those are the kinds of questions you ask in this particular step. The objectives that we set, did we achieve those objectives? All right, so that's the purpose of evaluation. So evaluating the impact and the results starts in the planning stage, okay? How? Well, you're going to set goals, right? You're going to set informational goals, or you're going to set motivational goals. So you've set the goals in the planning step, and then you've communicated based on those goals, and now you want to see, all right, now that the process of communication is done, how did I do? We were looking for message exposure. Did we get the message exposure? Or we were looking for brand awareness or top of mind. Did we get that? If it's motivational, well, we were trying to change the perception of our brand. Were we able to change that perception? We wanted to move product, like sell more product. Were we able to do that? Whatever your goal is, in this particular stage of evaluation, you are measuring the impact and the results that you had set in the planning stage. Okay, so now that we've got that down, let's get going on the different techniques that we use for evaluation. Okay, so let's get into evaluation techniques. We use a combination of techniques to evaluate how we did. They say about 10% of your budget should be allocated to evaluation, okay? And for us to really evaluate effectively, just using one of these is not enough. A combination, like I suggested, should be used to evaluate. Okay, let's talk about the first one, which is measurement of production. This is an elementary form of measurement, and it really does emphasize quantity over quality. So whether you spend 5 weeks placing a story in a top-level newspaper, or you wrote 10 press releases, it really doesn't matter. The management just wants to see how much work you put in. This isn't a very popular way to measure stuff at this point, because don't you think it would make more sense to place to spend more time, but to place a story in an amazing newspaper or a magazine, versus spending a lot of time doing just busy work? So that's the reason why it's a little less popular with the management, but it's elementary. It just involves counting the number of things that were created by your PR department and sent out. Okay, the next one is message exposure. So let's talk about that. Message exposure is actually a really good way to compile all the coverage that you may have received based on the things that you've produced and sent out to the media. The truth be told, nowadays we have software that do a lot of this stuff. Years ago, we had to, clip all of the things that we found, newspaper articles, put them on, printer paper, create a file, and then physically send it out to the client. When I was working in PR many years ago, that's the kind of work that we had to do. Today, there's software, there's digital clipping, you can put stuff and send it out via email, and it's so much easier. So any stories that you've generated through your earned media, right, through your press releases and relationships with the journalists, that's you compile all of those clips and you kind of try to figure out what it is in terms of evaluation, what it's like. How did you do based on that? So sometimes it's really hard to measure how many people actually opened a newspaper, right? So the way we calculate media impressions is that, let's say the newspaper circulation is 130,000 people, then we would just put the number as media impressions equals to 130,000. If the Today Show viewership is 10 million, then we would just say, well, the media impressions are 10 million. So it doesn't really matter who really opened the paper, read it, who was watching TV, the TV was on when that program was going on, and who was watching. We can't document that. It's really hard. So that's kind of how we evaluate media impressions. Okay, the next one is web analytics. Okay, so how many people came onto the site? As simple as that, easy to evaluate. And Google, Facebook, I mean, all of these, a lot of the social media platforms, everybody has an analytics section, which helps you look at something and say how many people viewed your story, how many people viewed your video, how many people came to your website. In fact, it's a lot more, I would say, a lot more in depth. Something like Google Analytics can tell you how many people came to the site, where did they come from, how long did they stay, which page made them want to leave, how many people came to your website by accident and left almost immediately, which articles were read. All of that information can be easily found from a free program on Google Analytics. So this is basic analytical work. And it's just something that we use to evaluate as well. The next one here is called AVE. This is something that is declining as a metric because it treats PR as a form of advertising, which it is not. So AVE is basically the publicity value of a story. So let's say the Doritos campaign, let's say they spent $40 million to advertise during the Super Bowl, which led to news coverage, right? So, they would just say, well, the news coverage that we got for our campaign was also worth 40 million because we paid for that, right? So it's the publicity value of the story, but it is kind of declining in terms of metric because, PR and advertising are two totally different worlds in the way we do stuff. One is earned media, one is paid media. And so it's just controversial. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is systematic tracking variables. So there are software that help you track which media is covering you, right? So for example, when you see these three graphs, you're seeing coverage over time, like how many people watched something, saw something, sentiment breakdown, what stories were positive, what stories were negative, what stories were neutral that the media covered, and then which kind of media covered as well. So what was the tone, what were the key points mentioned, what were the publications that covered it, and what was their circulation like, and when did they cover it. So it's there is information, there is software out there that for a PR person, we're able to look at some stuff and find ways to like pull the camera back and then just analyze what we're seeing. And there are some baseline studies as well that that PR companies do, and you can track that information on some of the software as well. So Agility PR Solution is one of those kinds of companies where you're seeing the same stuff: coverage, sentiment, media breakdown, and you just have to write a few things. You need to get subscription to this stuff, and then you can write a few things and it monitors everything for you, and it puts it down, breaks it down in these things. Baseline studies are sometimes noted in this kind of setup, or it could be a whole separate thing that you would do with a marketing department or a brand lift study, where you would, before you start the PR campaign, you do some research to see what people are thinking about your brand. And maybe there are some negative connotations, perceptions about the brand, and that's what you're trying to fix. And then you actually do the study, and then you do the research again to see if there was a brand lift. So did it get better? And you can plot it out in a graph to get a better feel for this is what we did, and this is what the impact was. If you don't have a baseline, it's hard to really analyze how well you did. So that's the idea of it. Okay, you can also evaluate your campaign through a QR code that takes people to a survey, or gets people to call somebody, right? And you can measure how many people called based on what they saw, based on the exposure of this particular campaign. So in this graphic, you can see if you get sick, call a doctor, and for more information, here, go to this website, this is the QR code, or call, and then you can actually track that. In the end, what matters is the ROI, return on investment. I spent $100 on this campaign, but the sales based on that was $400, right? So what was the return on investment? I actually did well, right? So for a PR person or a PR team, it's really important to showcase that ROI and showcase that the money that you gave us, it resulted in some very tangible, positive results. If you're not able to show that, you're less likely to get the same budget the following year. So it's extremely important to keep evaluation in mind, because without that step, getting new business from your client becomes difficult. So we've talked about the first two, measurement of production and exposure. Number 3 is audience awareness. So let's talk quickly about that. After your audience has been exposed to the message, and you've sent stuff out one time, you want to see if people continue to stay aware of that message. So you might want to send out surveys to get a feel of what they remember, how much awareness still exists. And then there's also what we call a day after recall metric. So let's say you would get people to watch a show or a movie, right? And then the next day you bring them in and you ask them what they remember. And so it's a good way to see, okay, how many ads did you see in the film? What do you remember about the ads? What do you remember about the main character? Throw in a few things like that. But just get a feel for, after exposure, what happened? Or do they continue to be aware, or have they forgotten? Okay. So that was number 3. And then let's move on to number 4, which is audience attitudes. So one thing that is important for us as PR people to know is, did the attitude change due to the PR efforts? So let's say, the company was not doing very well, lots of people were let go, and employee morale was really low. Okay, that's what the pretest showed. So then the PR department said, we got to do something to get people excited. So why don't we throw this big party and award night, and it'll kind of boost people's spirit. So you do that. And then you do this test again after that event is over. And what does that say? What does that results say? Does it say that the score is better? Well, that means that you were able to change attitude. And now with this measurement, evaluation work that you're doing, you're able to prove that you were able to change that morale. Okay, so we've covered the first four, and now let's talk about the fifth one, which is audience action. So if attitudes changed, then people acted, right? And that's what we're trying to measure. We could be measuring organizational goals. We could be measuring, sales lift. The question you want to ask is, here are our objectives. This is the objectives that we set in the planning stage, okay? So now that we've come a full circle, and this is the last step, did we achieve those objectives? That's the idea we're trying to, that's the question that we're trying to answer there. Finally, you can measure supplemental activities. So making sure that all audiences are receiving appropriate messaging, making sure that people who came to our events and conferences, did they enjoy it? There could be surveys and stuff that can be sent, polls that can be done during the conference to get that kind of information. And then in terms of the newsletters that we could be sending out, ask yourself, does the reader like it? Do they open it? Do they read it consistently? What are the stories they click on? Or what are the things that they don't care about? Okay, so they constantly do that on an annual basis to get an understanding, to audit our activities is also a part of evaluation of public relations. All right, so that's what we talked about. We talked about the 5 evaluation techniques. We talked about the importance of evaluation and how specific dollar amount of your budget should be allocated to evaluation so that you can prove the ROI and make sure that you continue to get very good projects and you're able to help the company's bottom line. Thank you.